This is a video from IGN in which some of their hosts describe a problem they see within the next gen sphere of influence. It's an interesting idea and an interesting topic. The idea that maybe this generation specifically has been held back, or at least it's severely affected by live service stuff. It's an interesting idea. What if all of these frustrations we feel about like the PS5 and Xbox Series console, all of that, what if it's all related? What if? I don't know. Let's see what they say.
Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Damon Hadfield, and this week I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Thanks for having me.
And Destin Legary from IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Bam. Thanks for having me, Damon.
And
it's Legary. I was making it way more complicated than it needed to be. I thought it was like Destin Legary or something. I was off. That's my bad. I was off. My bad. I will say Destin pops into streams every once in a while. I know he watches live channel clips and stuff. He's a pal, a bro, dare we say. I haven't ever spoken with Damon or Max, I don't think. But these guys are also OGs. They've been around forever.
do we have a doozy of a lead topic for you this week? You've probably heard by now, Sony has pulled Concord from sale and is shutting down the servers today, the day this episode goes live on September 6th. That's just 2 weeks after the game was launched. It is one of Sony's big first-party game releases of the year. Not even given a 2-week chance to find its footing. Of course, it did have a very disastrous launch. Steam all-time peak concurrent users sits at 697 players, and I think the day after it was released, so couldn't even crack 700 concurrents on Steam. Analyst tells us it sold at probably 25,000 units. At $40 a pop, that comes out to exactly $1 million. Director Ryan Ellis said, while many qualities of the experience resonated with players, we also recognize that other aspects of the game and our initial launch didn't land the way we'd intended.
I would like, I like the side-by-side between like what is actually being said on paper versus the actual sentiment. Let's be honest, working on something allegedly, according to one of the devs, for 8 years. Again, I don't know how on earth you spend 8 years on a game like Concord. That's insane. But allegedly, they spent 8 years on this. And just imagine if you did anything for 8 years, day in, day out. And then you finally put it out there, and it is, like, without a doubt, there is no question, it is a cataclysmic failure. Like, even the Acolyte can be like, oh, well, some people liked it. We got like 40,000 votes on a petition to renew it for another season. So like some people liked it. With this, there's like max, maybe at like a couple thousand people that were really happy with their purchase. You know, like, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's got to be devastating and really, really heartbreaking. There's no doubt about it. And nobody revels in that, but it doesn't change the fact that we look at the game and have to call a duck a duck. If it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. If the game's bad, the game's bad. At that Dragon Age preview thing I went to, there were a lot of other YouTubers and streamers, and a lot of them were like, I just think it's like really important to be like focused on positivity, and we need to just, you know, stop critiquing games so much. And I was like, okay, that's how you like actively, for one, deceive your audience so that you can protect like your corporate connection to get invited to stuff. And I think it's built on a false premise that you have to schmooze and you have to be like overly positive for companies to invite you to stuff or give you access. Ubisoft will still invite me to preview events and still like involve me in stuff, despite the fact that I called like Assassin's Creed Valhalla a travesty of open world design. I gave Star Wars Outlaws, if I had to put a number on it, I said it was like a 6. If you play it on the hardest difficulty, it plays closer to like a 7 probably. But on defaults, it's like a 6 out of 10 game. I've not been that kind to them, but they will still invite me to stuff because like they just are honestly hoping that I do like something. And when I do like something they do, it'll mean way, way more. But I was shocked at how many content creators out there and streamers and stuff were like, well, we just really want to focus on the positivity. And, you know, we don't need to call games out for these shortcomings. I was like, oh God. Oh God. This is why we get crap though. Like this is why we got garbage. And we get garbage because they're going to people for feedback that are saying, I don't want to be critical. I don't want to think because it hurts my brain. And it was pretty interesting because there were a lot of people, of course, to be clear, a lot of people at that event who were very, very, very sweet, extremely intelligent, way smarter than me, and think about things very, very critically and analyze and critique stuff. But I was surprised at the number of people, a lot of them maybe you don't know or wouldn't recognize, and others you might, that intentionally said they play through games and like don't critique stuff, don't think about it, which is just, it was pretty telling. It's like, so off the record, like when we're just talking privately, you're going to tell me that you like intentionally don't critique stuff because you want to just have, you don't want to be like a bummer. I was like, okay, I see what we're doing.
So I don't think there's much point debating why this game failed. I think the reasons are obvious. Hero shooters were exciting in 2016. Concord arrives very late to the party with no popular IP attached to it like Marvel Rivals. Concord is a very generic name. Doesn't tell anything about the game, anyone about the game. People didn't like the characters in this game, and that's kind of important in a hero shooter. The heroes are supposed to be really cool and likable. The curious might have tried it out if it were free to play, but they slapped a price on it. And finally, I think Sony did very little marketing for this game. It was fully revealed in May of this year, but then just sort of was quietly released during Gamescom, the biggest game show of the year, where Sony didn't even have a booth. I'm not in marketing. I think the obvious choice would be maybe Sony might want to have had this game there, get lots of people playing it, get lots of people excited the week that was going to be out. But who am I?
Gamescom is a great point to bring up. I hadn't really thought of that, but they did drop it during Gamescom when you have tens of thousands of people coming into a showroom floor where you could have had a PlayStation booth with just dozens and dozens of computers set up for people to play Concord. It could have had videos made on it. You know, every major publication would have been talking about it. That could have been great. And they didn't do that, which leads you to think that either they were so confident that this was going to pop off, they just didn't feel the need to bother trying. Maybe that's it. They're like, we don't need to market it. It's going to be successful anyways. Or they knew it was going to be a failure, and so they didn't bother wasting the money. Neither is great.
I'm not a marketer for Sony, so I think it's more interesting to discuss why Sony is abandoning this game so soon, not even really giving it a chance to find its footing. Max, I start with you. What happened here?
One other thing I just remembered, I've talked about this before, but like back with God of War Ragnarok, I had a contact at Sony who was divine. She was amazing. And she, when like Spider-Man 2 came out, I was talking with her about like review codes and stuff. And she was like, she made a couple of comments that made me think the marketing team within Sony was getting decimated. Because at one point she was like, yeah, sorry, we're running on like a skeleton crew. And at the time I was like, oh, maybe people are just sick or something. And then she said other stuff like, oh, I used to be allowed to distribute review codes. Now I can't. It's a separate person that does that elsewhere in corporate. So thinking back to it now, I'm getting, maybe it is the case that one of the ways Sony is trying to save money is that they have changed how they market stuff, and they've started working with the skeleton crew in the marketing department. I don't know.
The big question is, who was this game for? And I think the Overwatch comparison is an obvious one. The general sort of Guardians of the Galaxy of it all was kind of something that jumped out at me. What's funny is to look back at the initial reveal for this game. The very first glimpse we got of it was this completely sort of ambiguous, nebulous, like literally in a nebula, this ship traveling through space. We had no idea what this game was. We heard it was a first-person shooter of some variety, something multiplayer flavored. And the thing that people were talking about for the better part of a year about this game, following its announcement, was the CGI cheeseburger that was shown in the trailer, which is quite a literal nothing burger, as it turns out. Then we got this sort of the big reveal of the cinematic narrative cutscenes that were going to be holding this thing together, which, you know, admittedly looked pretty slick. And then that immediately tossed into gameplay that really, I think, left a lot of people cold. And again, hero shooters were the new hotness back in 2016 when this game was early in development. I think they spent something like 8 years making this thing.
Yeah, that's what they've said. Yeah, the burger is a great example. Like this is what everybody was talking about for like a year, and it had nothing at all to do with the game, like literally nothing. So why was it like, the more I look at it, this trailer just doesn't make any sense. It sets false expectations. People are like very confused at what we're even doing here. Like, this has nothing to do with a 5v5 hero shooter. Like, they were trying so hard to just make the characters feel like Guardians of the Galaxy 2.0, I guess, that they just forgot that, no, at the end of the day, you're still selling a hero shooter. Like, even if the characters were super likable and lovable, you got to sell people on the game, because the game is what they're going to be playing. You know, you're going to see a cutscene once a week that's 90 seconds long, and then you're going to be playing, hopefully for them, hours and hours and hours of the game. So you got to sell the game first and foremost, in my opinion. And they just kind of had it backwards. And even then, like, I don't think the characters were that interesting or compelling, so it didn't matter.
I think they spent something like, what, 8 years making this thing?
Said.
Yeah, back then that was also there was one Guardians of the Galaxy movie out, and then there was another one that people were looking forward to, and now we are like, that team has disbanded in the MCU. Like, we're so far beyond that. And anybody who is actually like hankering for a Guardians of the Galaxy game, we got one of those in like 2018.
It was great.
And then
Oh yeah, 21. That was unironically a very good game. If you have not played Guardians of the Galaxy, you should. It's very good. It's way better than you would think, but it unfortunately didn't do very well, because a lot of people thought it was going to be like Marvel's Avengers, the Avengers game that released shortly before this, which is too bad, because this game is way better than that game was. Very good.
if you want to play a new hero shooter featuring Marvel characters, there's one coming out in December. Marvel Rivals is right around the corner. So it's just, it just feels like the answer to a question that nobody asked, aside from, I don't know, maybe some VCs or board members. It very much looks like a product for the sake of being a product. And it sucks, because clearly a lot of people worked really hard on it. It is definitely polished. I saw a photo on Reddit that people were being a little bit snarky of, which is a screen cap of the IGN review that Travis Northup did, giving it a 7, saying it was good. That was never the issue. It's not the fact that it's a broken game or an inherently bad game. It's just that a game that nobody really wants to play.
I get what he's saying, but that sentence is a little funny. Okay, let's just take it back.
Game or an inherently bad game. It's just that a game. It's not the fact that it's a broken game or an inherently bad game. It's just that a game that nobody really wants to play. And when it
It's not that it's an inherently bad game or anything. It's just that nobody wants to play it, which is true. I do think that's the case. And I will agree, Concord mechanically at launch is pretty solid as far as like a hero shooter goes. It plays well, movement's good. There's a lot of varieties of different abilities and stuff. I don't necessarily like some of the way that they interplay. I don't like how in some modes, like if you went around with a hero, you have to change the hero. I understand why they did it, because they wanted to avoid you sitting on a character for, you know, hours and hours and hours if it was broken or whatever. So I get why they did that. I just didn't think it was that fun. Like, I could justify it, but it wasn't that fun. So there were other things. But I think the point was, when you review a game, you have to review the entire package. And for something like Concord, part of the package is the overall offering, which is much more lackluster. The fact that it's $40 in an age of free-to-play live service games, that does affect it. It just does. And I mean, if you're going to review something like Hellblade 2, and you're going to say, hey, for however much that was, $50, I think. If you're going to say, hey, it's really, really short, and that's going to be a detraction on your review, it's going to be a -1 or whatever, I think you have to mention that this is a live service game that's coming out and is being charged for when everything else is free. If everything else's price is 0 and this is priced at 40, the like percentage difference is literally undefined. Okay, it is incalculably more expensive to play Concord than Overwatch because it's free.
is a strictly multiplayer game, not having people to play it is kind of a big issue. But that's a bigger problem outside of the game itself. That's sort of a societal infrastructure type of problem.
And I do agree, it's tough to like factor into a review that's done like at launch or before launch how many people are going to play it, because you could review this game and be like, yeah, if a lot of people are playing this and you can get quick matches and stuff, then maybe it's a 7. But if nobody's playing it, it's going to play more like a 2, because you're not going to be able to find matches or anything. So I will give them credit that is, you can't really factor that into a review that's happening before you know what the player counts are like.
And it's funny because, you know, Sony's clearly been betting really big on live service games. We heard at one point that they had, I think, 12 of them in development. We've since heard that they've halved that,
which is crazy. Some of them we've heard of, like The Last of Us Part 2 online, whatever, ultra premium experience. That was one of them that was canned. We've heard of a couple of others that have been canned, but there's also a few of these live service games we've never heard of, that were never mentioned or announced, that were canned. So just imagine how much money they wasted across the board from studios you've never, like, you didn't even realize were working on something.
They had a huge win earlier this year with Helldivers, which up until the halfway point of the year, at least last I checked, was the best-selling game of the year, period. So clearly, live service isn't inherently the issue here. It's more just making games that people actually want to play. And you can look at this game for 3 seconds and you see how expensive it is. Mm-hmm. It is clearly a very polished, you know, even if you hate the character designs, like, a lot of work went into this game. It looks like it's been cooking for the better part of a decade. But then it's also, you look at, I don't know, the games that blow up on Steam. You look at something like Pal World, like AAA polish is not necessarily the thing that gets people gravitating towards games. You know, there's frequently runaway hits on Steams that are, you know, arguably like games as a service that are kind of janky, and that doesn't matter if people are having a good time. This just kind of feels like, you know, that final paper that you spent all night working on. You really just wanted to get everything perfect, get it totally right, and then you wound up not turning it in on time and failing the class. So, yeah,
That's a good comparison. Yeah, that's good. I like that. It's a day late and $1 too expensive.
Big flop for Sony. Not surprising, kind of looking at the timeline of events here. Skipping Gamescom, again, that was sort of a big canary in a coal mine moment. The fact that Sony didn't even decide to get this in front of people. So, yeah, it's sad. And I hope that it also kind of serves as a warning, because, like, we see so many games pop up as live service projects and then quickly just keel over and die. Or, you know, we start sort of hearing the beginnings of their death rattle, so to speak. Foam Stars was a big PS5 and PC and PS4 game that launched earlier this year.
Was it, though? I tried it. I bought it because I was like, oh, I'll try making a video on it. I don't think we ever did, because I couldn't find enough to even talk about it. It was like, it's worse Splatoon with like $50 skins. It was unbelievably bad. It was so bad.
And again, it's a games as a service. It is a game. It is sort of like Splatoon, but it's foamy. And come on in, everybody, and check it out and play it. And that just recently flipped the switch to free to play, because people, I'm guessing, weren't paying money to buy it and to play it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, as you say, in this case, it doesn't seem to be an issue of quality, because we did give it a 7 out of 10, and I should point out that is right in line with all other reviewers. It has a 67 on Metacritic, so basically everyone was giving this about a 7. Not a bad game, it's just
It is funny that this is like the second time they've mentioned the review. I don't know if they're shaken by it. I do agree, like, some people were pointing to it. I think they also gave Dustborn a 7. Is that true? Can somebody check? The idea that, yeah, they did. Jesus Christ. If the idea that they would give this a 7 is unbelievable to me. Who did they have review this? She covers Roblox. Oh, she's literally only ever reviewed House Flipper 2 and Dustborn. That just seems mean to have her review this. Also gave it a 7. I don't know, man. That was kind of cruel to have her do it. But that's part of the reason, is people like, you're giving Concord and Dustborn 7s. And then what was the other game they gave? I think they gave Black Myth like an 8 or something. You know, it's like, okay.
Game, like Max pointed out, just a game that nobody was asking for, nobody was looking for, and didn't have an audience to actually release out to. Destin, Xbox is no stranger to, you know, stepping on rakes, as Ryan McCaffrey likes to say. What was sort of your reaction to this unprecedented news earlier this week?
I have no idea who this game was ever made for. You just look at it, and right away, the characters feel bland, boring, and derivative. Everybody was calling it a Guardians of the Galaxy knockoff from the first trailer revealing the characters. They did not like the interaction between the characters. So I'm left wondering, like, was there ever focus testing done on this? Were they getting positive reinforcement? Because I didn't see any positivity toward it from the initial trailer.
Derivative is a very good word. The entire feeling is that this game is the product of probably executives looking at other successful stuff and just saying, let's try that. It doesn't feel like anybody had a pitch for something really unique and different. And it's like they pointed out earlier, where when this game was allegedly first come up with and pitched was like 2016. That's how long they've been working on this. Like when this was initially starting to get worked on, if they actually spent 8 years on it, like Donald Trump had never, like he hadn't even been elected president yet. That's how long ago that was. Okay. Do you feel old yet? So back then, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy seems like it's doing well. The first movie did pretty well. And then like, oh, well, let's just make that, but in Overwatch with some narrative stuff and it'll be good. And then they spent 8 years working on it. And it's just, I mean, maybe the bigger question is how the hell do you spend 8 years working on this? This has been a trend in the games industry for a while where I just feel like, what the hell are they spending all this time doing? Like, I get it. COVID sort of delayed things. I get it. But it seems insane to me that they could spend 8 years on something like this. Games are hard to make, no doubt. But 8 years, almost a decade for this? Like, that seems insane. No crunch extends time. Maybe, but then you see other companies like CDPR. They were able to put Phantom Liberty together with a similar team size in the span of like a year and a half, 2 years, effectively. Like, it seems like a managerial issue. I think you're right, Anurag. I think you're right. I don't know how you spend 8 years on something like this.
Once you launch the game and you see their version of Drax, and we get a peek at the cinematics with these characters we have no connection to, we don't understand the relationship. And I saw somebody online compare it to jumping into season 3 of a television show and you're just expected to have some connection to whoever these characters are supposed to be, and you just don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. It's really weird how the cutscenes play out, and it's just, you're supposed to understand. Like at one point, this guy who's supposed to be, his name is Lennox in the game, but he's supposed to be their Star-Lord, basically, who loves hot sauce because that's relatable. He takes a minute to like talk to the computer that runs the ship in this weirdly intimate way, and he's like, I just need you to know, I appreciate you, and there's no one else I'd rather be on this adventure with. You're like, who the hell are you what are you talking about? Like, it's a computer, chill out. Like, what are we doing? It's just really, really weird. Maybe they initially thought they were going to have a story mode that was canned. Maybe there's something like that builds a relationship between these characters. Then there's an online component. Maybe that could work, but I don't know.
It fails on a storytelling perspective. And I actually don't really agree with Travis Northup's review completely. I think that the gameplay feels very slow, and I think the more you play and you get matched with, you know, stacked teams and such, at least as a solo player, it becomes much less fun. In addition, there are modes where they tried something new and it would lock you completely out of using a character a second time, trying to shake up the sandbox. But you know what I don't like being told to do by a video game? Not play as my favorite character. So, like, there were just so many strange decisions made with Concord that I don't understand. But at the end of the day, everybody basically said, we don't want to pay $40 to play this. And they didn't. And that's the only thing you can really do as a consumer, not buy things that aren't of interest to you.
And I'm so glad to see that people voted with their wallets, because that's all it really takes. Everybody collectively said, we're good. And it was a colossal flop as a result. It's really that simple. Like with so many of these games, like, oh, you don't like the microtransactions, you don't like the skins, don't buy them. Easy. But they keep doing it because people keep buying them. You know, like it's just, if you don't like something, if everybody agrees that they don't like it and they don't buy it, things will actually change.
It's not the first game to stumble out the gate, although, you know, it definitely has maybe the biggest stumble. But, you know,
Stumble out the gate. Hold on. This reminds me that Concord did not stumble out the gate. What Concord did was this. Hold on. I'm going to pull it up. Some of you might know where I'm going with this. That's Concord. Okay. They launch the go gun, and then that's not even the right phrase. They fire the gun. everybody go, and just immediately leg snaps and they collapse to the ground screaming in agony. And then a vet comes over and puts them down to put them out of their misery. That's what Concord did. Not quite a stumble. A little bit worse.
I think of other games that have had comebacks, games like No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy XIV. I think in these cases, the developers put their heads down and they just quietly get to work improving their game. And after, eventually, after some period of time, the game is in a good place and is sort of welcomed again by its community. But like here, Sony is.
What community?
Well, I'm just saying.
There is no community.
Okay.
It capped off. It's like under 700 players on Steam. Clearly, this is not resonating with people. I don't see a world where this game goes offline, they put their heads down, and they come back, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, I love Concord!" all of a sudden, like the people who were willing to buy the game have made their voices clear and said, "I'm not going to."
Yeah. No, I mean, to No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy XIV, all of these were things that people wanted. These were games that were, if anything, they underdelivered, or they launched in a rough state. But the idea of I don't know, the people who made The Witcher doing a big open world futuristic game, or a Final Fantasy MMO, these are like things that are like, okay, I'm in. What is Concord? Like, who is this again? Who is this for? And even if it was just try to kind of loop people in the most basic, just the tiniest bit of curiosity, $40 is going to prevent that. And I mean, when Overwatch has gone free to play, when everything else is free to play, it's just there's barely any pull to draw people in, and there's a big, huge paywall right in front of them actually checking it out of morbid curiosity. Like, had this even launched as just a perk on PlayStation Plus, which again, Sony has a subscription service. Yep. It seems like maybe that could have benefited. Like a bunch of great games as a service have actually gotten a good boost from PlayStation Plus. Rocket League and Fall Guys both launched as PlayStation Plus games, and those are the kind of games that if you were charging $40 for them or $20 for them, with no opportunity to check them out, just kind of like, I'll take it for a spin. I don't see those games ever having taken off, but they were able to kind of attract a active player base because there was an easy way to get on board, an easy way to check it out. You look at another big competitor to Concord is Apex Legends, and that, when it dropped, it came out of nowhere, which again just made a big kind of splash on its own. And again, it was from a reputable studio, it's from Respawn. So,
and EA spent millions paying every streamer you've ever heard of to play it for days, and they played it. And then they kept playing it because they really enjoyed it, and of course it was free to play. You could just get in there and try it, and people did it and loved it. So I think with a lot of it, there's just, at the end of the day, it was a game nobody really wanted. And I think knowledge of the price point really, really harmed it. So I agree with them.
People are like, what, did you hear about Apex Legends? I don't know. What's that? Oh, it's like a battle royale, but it's in the Titanfall universe. Cool.
Valve also released Deadlock, which is invite only, and it's behind a lock system to get in. And last I checked, it had like 90,000 concurrents, putting it regularly in the top 10 games on SteamDB. So you have people like Valve also entering this market, and guess what? That game's free. So that's what you're up against. And when you come out and you're like, well, you got to pay $40 to play this one. Why?
I think the comparison with PlayStation Plus also, you have to reference that. It's just, like they said, they have their own service. Sony could have done that, put Concord on PlayStation Plus. If you have PlayStation Plus, you try it for free. Otherwise, it's $40. But they didn't do that, and instead charged everybody $40. And I think it was pretty clear that was just greed personified. Like, that was them trying to milk everybody for the little bit of extra cash. It worked with Helldivers. Why won't it work now? And it blew up in their face. And to their credit, they refunded everybody on the back end. So anybody that bought it is getting their money back, which is great. And I will say I did get my refund on PlayStation for Concord. I bought the PS5 version of it, and it did. I did get my money back, so good on them. But I really think that that's what it is. It was a lot of arrogance, thinking that they could just get away with it and people would suck it up and buy it.
On Sony's part, which we see on a pretty regular basis, where it's almost like somebody up there was just expecting people to care. Someone, they were like, oh yeah, there's a brand new first party PlayStation 5 multiplayer game. It's coming out in August, $40. But like, that's not enough to move the needle. That's not going to get people excited or on board. That's not I don't know. There's no there there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
who do you think you are, Nintendo? Get out of here.
Valve being like, we put out a new game, everyone loses their mind because Valve doesn't put out a new game ever so often. They don't do that much. So something to care about.
It could be that in this case, Sony just could not afford to keep this game running with the player count so low, because this is Firewalk Studios. It's their first game. They were formed in 2018, so that's why the math about it being in development for 8 years doesn't really add up. It would have had to start in 2016, but the studio was founded in 2018.
And my interpretation was that it was a pitch and it was a project that people started working on before they founded the studio. They founded the studio with a handful of investments from various places, but they founded the studio once they were like, okay, we're going to do this. But they had been working on the game prior to that. Very few studios are founded with no idea of what their first game is going to be. Usually they have a concept or a vertical slice that they sell to investors, and then they found the studio with that money.
Whatever. This is their first game, so they've had no money coming in, no revenue, except for whatever investment capital they had, and then of course Sony bought them last year. So like, this is it. They've got no money coming in, and it may just be that Sony can't afford to keep it running, because Guha Bella from Velen Studios, they made Knockout City, which is, they know something about launching a live service game and then having some issues with it. He told GamesIndustry.biz that a 50-person team would amount to about $500,000 a month just in labor costs. Based on that, he estimates a $20 game would need to sell $25,000 a month to match this. Concord had a $40 price tag, and Firewalk Studios has at least 150 staff. So it could just be that Sony just could not afford to keep this game running.
Well, to be clear, they said they were going to reevaluate a way to get it to new audiences or to their audience, whatever. I interpreted that as they're going to basically take it away. They're going to relaunch it with a bigger marketing campaign as free to play or something. I still don't think that works, but my interpretation of the post that the head of the studio made was that they were going to try again at some point in the future, probably putting it on PlayStation Plus as they should have from the beginning. But I still don't think that really works. The brand of Concord is so overwhelmingly tarnished. I just don't see it changing or recovering. And like they said earlier, when people are like, oh, well, it could make a comeback, like No Man's Sky had much more negativity surrounding it at launch. Sure, but they had negativity because people cared, because people liked the idea. They wanted that game and they didn't get it. So with this is a game nobody wants and nobody really cares about. I don't think it'll magically be successful just because you launched it for free. Like, I don't think that changes it. If they try again, it will be pretty hilarious to see it once again flop. But the other thing to remember about this is that most studios that are brand new, that have not proven themselves, usually you get a company like PlayStation who's interested in buying them out. You have them come in and they will basically say, okay, behind closed doors, we're really interested in buying you. We think that this could be really, really good. We think you have a lot of potential as a studio. We love the talent. We love the concept. We love all of this. We'd like to buy you out, but you need to nail your first launch. If you can do that, then we're game. And we've seen it with other studios that Sony has bought before. Even when they bought like Bluepoint, for example. They buy Bluepoint after Bluepoint demonstrates themselves as a world-class talent. They show that they are worth being owned multiple times. But with Concord, they bought them out before the game had even been announced. What does that tell you? That tells you, I think, that they, amazingly enough, were so wildly confident that this was going to be successful, they were willing to put aside even the danger of Microsoft bidding for, like, they didn't even want to entertain that. They were worried that Microsoft would come in and try to buy them up or outbid them or something if Concord popped off. And they thought this game had so much potential that the odds were high. If Xbox got the chance to buy them up, they might be outbid. So they came in and bought them privately before any of that had the potential to happen. And they probably got a decent deal on it too, I would imagine. But that should tell you how out of touch those executives are that are making those decisions, that they thought that this was going to pop off to the point where they were willing to spend millions of dollars well before it was justified.
Yeah, of course not. I mean, they made $1 million. It likely cost at least $100 million.
On the low end.
Like some people are saying $200 million, plus they purchased the studio to make this product. And I just don't think there's any salvaging it. It's just too low of a retention rate, and I don't see how you get players interested in this. The fact of the matter is Concord is not cool to play or have any interaction with, and that's how people feel about it.
Yep. And as I've said many times, one of the most potent forces in all of gaming is peer pressure. And the second a game is deemed uncool and cringe, you're not shaking that. Like, honestly, being called cringe is probably worse than being called like buggy or broken, because at least you can fix that. But you can't fix the dialogue in like Saints Row. You know, you can't fix the dialogue in Forspoken. You can polish it. You can get running really, really well. You can't fix that stuff though.
I was going to say, do you remember Paragon, the sort of MOBA style hero shooter that Epic put out and then subsequently said, never mind. And then I think issued refunds. And I think the cool thing they did there was they made the assets free for people to use in Unreal or whatever. But yeah, like that was there. I don't think there was any, ill will towards that game. It just didn't attract a player base. And again, like Epic has a little bit of, they got a cushion to fall back on. They're not, they're not really hurting there. The people are, as long as people are using Unreal, that's fine. And, clearly they got back on their feet with Fortnite after that. But, yeah, this just strikes me as Sony just pulling the ripcord as hard as possible, because they are already in the hole with this game, and it's coming out just not even keeping itself afloat. This thing sunk like a brick. And yeah, I'm wondering if this is, you can give a game like this the benefit of the doubt. Maybe we'll see it reemerge as some kind of a free-to-play thing, but there's so much just negativity surrounding it. The reputation this game has is as one of the biggest failures in video game history, and it's not even like there's room for a redemption arc. Like it's again, No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, these are things that people desperately wanted, and if anything, they were victims of really high expectations that came back to bite them. And in this case, the product reveal was a nothing burger flying through space. Like, who would want this? So I'm thinking this is going to be more one of those David Zaslav style write-offs. But yeah, again, I wanted to see Coyote versus Acme. I didn't want to play Concord. I didn't care. I don't,
One thing I had somebody reach out about, I had somebody who works in, they're like a corporate accountant, and they reached out about one of the videos I previously made where I said maybe they're just going to take the tax write-off and do a net operating loss carry forward on it for the next 7 years and call it good. And this person reached out, who is basically the guy that would be doing the write-offs in the company for this, if that's what they decided to do. He said it's complicated because they didn't pay for the operating costs for the last like the first 6 years of development, or 4 years of the studio's existence or anything. They bought the studio and then they ran the development costs and everything for like a year after that. And he's like, depending on how they categorized the purchase a year ago or 2 years ago, it might not be as simple as writing off this project, because they bought the studio, which is an asset over here. The asset hasn't lost the money, it's the project they were doing. So you can write off the project here, but the asset you can't just write off unless you're gonna like can it and shut down the whole studio and stuff. But I don't think they want to do that. They just bought the studio. Like, why would you do that? So I think that there's just, none of this is as simple as, well, just do this and then move on. Like, all of this is way more complicated by their own making. It didn't have to be this bad, but they did this to themselves.
No, there's one thing I want to touch on about this game, and it just strikes me as just a kind of incongruous product. Aside from the fact that it's either generic or the style, the designs aren't for everybody, the pairing of a fast-paced or medium-paced multiplayer shooter with weekly narrative cutscenes are just antithetical. Like the people who are after narrative storytelling and beautifully polished cutscenes, like speaking as one of those people, you play single-player games.
Yeah.
Multiplayer, you want rock solid gameplay. You want something fast paced. You don't want something getting in the way, stopping you down to tell you, hold your hand and tell you a story. The Overwatch vignettes, I could be wrong, but I feel like those kind of came after the fact. There were a handful of them floating around, but that game launched with a kind of a cool like starter pack of action figures. I think it was 12 people on the roster at first, and they gradually trickled out these little shorts, giving you a little bit more context. But it was always gameplay first, story second. And in this case, this was one of the big selling points, was we're going to get a new, highly polished cutscene every week. Dude, Fortnite doesn't even do that. Fortnite does like a new cutscene every like 4 months or something. They do that with a season pass.
And I'm going to do a poll here real quick. With these cutscenes, If any of you have played Call of Duty recently, or maybe you played Fortnite or Concord, I'm willing to bet that you didn't even watch those cutscenes, okay? That's why I'm gonna ask you, do you watch the cutscenes in these live service games? Yes? No? Rarely. I just wanna know where you're at. Because I know if I'm booting up Fortnite, if I'm booting up Call of Duty, I'm not sitting down for the next 5 minutes and watching a cutscene play out. Like, maybe it'll play out if there's no skip option. But if I'm booting up Warzone, I'm booting up Warzone because I want to play Warzone. I understand there's a story and stuff, but I'm not like playing Warzone to watch a cutscene. You know, like that's not why I'm there. Overwatch only. Like for some games, absolutely I'll watch the cutscenes. But for these live service games, if I'm playing Overwatch, I'm playing Overwatch to play Overwatch. I don't really need to watch a cutscene explaining the intricacies of the characters. Just for me, it's not why I'm playing those games. And same thing with like Call of Duty, same thing with all of these others. Yeah, rarely I think is probably fair for most people, but I just don't think it really lines up with how these games are built and pitched to people. It's just not why people are playing them, you know?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we did get those cutscenes, the writing was, I'll just say, profoundly bad. It was just not interesting or engaging whatsoever. You have no idea who the characters are. There's no reason to latch on to any of them, and they don't really give you a reason to appreciate who they are as individuals in the game. So they even failed with that.
Destin, how do we compare this to Redfall? Maybe that's probably the most high-profile, disaster release for Xbox in recent years. Concord actually reviewed a little bit better than Redfall. It has a 64 on OpenCritic as opposed to 57 for Redfall.
I think the difference is Redfall was much more broken at launch. I mean, Redfall's problems were that it was basically unplayable on a technical level, whereas Concord grew unplayable within a few days because there was nobody to matchmake with. So they were similarly, but at least during the previews and stuff, Concord, I think, played decently well when there were people to play with.
But Redfall's still here, even though Arcane Austin has unfortunately been shut down. You can still play Redfall today, and it's actually in better shape than it was because, like I said...
What the hell is this gameplay? Okay, this is just funny. Okay, well, good. Whatever, IGN, I don't care. Good.
Austin has unfortunately been shut down. You can still play Redfall today, and it's actually in better shape than it was because, like I said, the developers just quietly worked on it, and they updated it, and there was even a final update that provided that offline mode. This is great B-roll, by the way, that we're seeing right here.
Yeah, I mean, Redfall was equally problematic. It's a game that came out that I'm not sure people wanted from Arcane Austin, which no longer exists. And we saw what happened with Arcane Austin, unfortunately. And I do wonder where this leaves the development studio, Firewalk, which is now part of the PlayStation family, as we've recently seen another failure with Suicide Squad and how WB has decided to move forward with that. So it's just really, really unfortunate that these games are coming out and they're trying to break into new genres, but they're doing so in a way that doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work for the studios who are making those games, and it doesn't resonate with players, and it's disastrous for these companies. So, like I said at the beginning of the show, I don't understand how this ever got greenlit, how this got past focus testing, and how nobody just said, hey, I don't like this.
There is a vibe among a lot of these groups that I alluded to earlier with some like content creators and streamers where they're like, let's just focus on the positivity. Positivity is great. Self-deception is not. And refusing to acknowledge obvious problems is self-deception. When you're just lying to yourself because you want to be more optimistic and positive about stuff, that doesn't help anybody, okay? All that does is set yourself up to be conned. And with this, like, it seems like a lot of these studios basically conned themselves. There was the report, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, which game was it? I think it was it Saints Row? The Saints Row reboot, where the head of that project, he basically said all of the negativity was white noise. Was it Saints Row or was it a different game? I can't remember. I think it was Saints Row. Anyway, there's been multiple instances of this where there are games where clearly the feedback is overwhelmingly negative. You know, people are just not interested at all. And you would think that they would take that feedback and try to grow from it and be like, okay, interesting. Let's figure it out. How can we fix this? Maybe it was Suicide Squad. But basically, you would think that they would take that feedback. But a lot of these studios approach it as, no, if people don't like our game or are bashing character designs or the writing or whatever, it's just white noise. It's just people being unfair. It was Concord. It was an ex-Bungie dev who said it. Oh, really? Oh. But I've definitely seen stories of other projects and other games where a similar sentiment is echoed, where they have this way of doing things where they just don't take the critical feedback and they just take it as people just being unreasonable, and we'll just do our own thing and move on from there. And then you get a Concord because they just didn't listen to any of the critical feedback, and then they're surprised when nobody's interested in the game. And it's the same thing with like Forspoken. When that game launched and of course was very, very cringy, there was reporting that people within the studio were genuinely shocked at the impressions people had, because a lot of people within the studio did not realize it would be perceived as like cringy. They thought people would really think that character was slaying. They really thought that, but that's because they did not connect with it. They didn't see it. They had no idea, which is pretty amazing if you think about it, that they didn't realize that maybe that's how that would be perceived. But still, it's wild.
Well, I don't know what this means for Firewalk Studios. This, like I said, was their only game. I think it's probably inevitable that we'll be hearing about layoffs at some point in the future, which is very unfortunate. I'll be very sorry to hear about that. But I just don't really see what Firewalk Studios is going to be doing in place of Concord. But Matt,
and they have the secret level short to look forward to, which will feature Concord.
Exactly. This is the show. This is the Love, Death, and Robots anthology show. Yeah.
You know what really sucks about this is the people who made the decision to make this game what it was are the ones who are way above the pay grade of the people who actually made the game, who are going to get laid off. And that sucks. It's the same deal with Redfall. It's the same deal with Suicide Squad. And in both those cases, I don't know, I was like, hey, what if the people who made Dishonored made a vampire game that you can play with your friends? Okay, cool. That's a neat idea. Suicide Squad, whatever. Yeah, Rocksteady wants to try their hand at it. Again, there's some semblance of like a kernel of a good idea there. In this case, I don't know what the initial appeal was, aside from just trying to cash in on the most lucrative looking games as a service, live service model that was the hot thing 6-7 years ago.
And that's literally the extent of it. And that's why people have been kind of, as some people have said, grave dancing on Concord's grave. It's not because people hate the people at Firewalk specifically. It's not because they, after one of the devs called the critics of the game talentless hacks, then you've kind of opened yourself up to getting crucified. So yeah, that definitely, I think, is a factor. But for the most part, most of the people working on this game, I'm sure, are very nice people, very capable people, very talented people. Nobody's doubting that. The reason people are grave dancing is because of what Concord represents, which is the soulless, lifeless corporate pursuit of quick cash by trend chasing. That's why they chase it.
I know. I mean, Sony, they bought
Celebrate it.
Firewalk just last April, I believe. Someone at Sony looked at this and said, yes, we will pay money for Concord and release it
a lot
next
of money.
summer. But Max, on the flip side of all this bad news for Sony, we should mention that Astrobot is out now, and it's just fantastic.
Astrobot's killer.
It got 9 out of 10 from IGN.
Please, yeah, and if you want to take it for a spin and you haven't, just load up Astro's Playroom. There's your free-to-play demo of what that game is like, because it's just that, but for 4 times as long.
Oh yeah,
and PlayStation does deserve props for offering full refunds for Concord and taking it offline and just saying, hey, we're going to give you your money back. We're going to eat this one and move forward however we need to.
Yeah, which I do think they deserve credit for. And I will always give them credit for that, even though I think the game is laughably terrible. As a product offering, they do deserve credit for giving people their money back. That's props to them. I'm sure that wasn't easy to do. I'm sure it was a headache. Yeah, they weren't giving up that much money, but at least they did it.
Crazy, crazy times. I've been covering this business for a long time. Like I said, I think this is an unprecedented move to pull a huge first-party game with such short amount of time actually being available on the market.
Might have just been that they were like, hey, we're not going to make any money from this. We're just going to lose money. And we're about to launch a PS5 Pro. Let's just let that dominate the news and headlines, and we'll just call it good. We'll try again later. Maybe they have other plans, but it is pretty funny that they have that big mess up, and then they come out with like a PS5 Pro announcement that's extremely expensive. It doesn't seem to do that much differently. Like, I don't know, man. PlayStation's just really struggled. There's some rumors and people speculating based on other reports and rumors, people suggesting that at this PlayStation showcase, there might not even be first-party studio games. It might only be third-party, which would be insane. I don't know if they're going to do that. They got to have some first-party stuff. Like, Sony is just, they're so far behind where they should be at this point in the generation. It's kind of tragic. He took my thing. Red flag, red